I've got some questions about what the Idaho cops are saying. I really do. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here.
To answer that one.
Well, I think Darren and I have, the evidence suggests that there was a reason that this particular house was chosen. What that reason is, we don't know. We don't know who the target was, and we're not going to speculate on that up here today. But we can tell you that for whatever reason, Mr. Koberger chose that residence. Perhaps it's the location, layout, we don't know. But that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's what that statement likely led to.
Okay, that is a chicken shit remark. I'm sorry. That is ridiculous. They said it was targeted, I assume, because they wanted to keep the panic level down. But sorry, that's not your job. Your job is to tell the truth. If there was reason to panic, then you need to let the community know that. There was a killer on the loose who just murdered 4 people in the span of 12 minutes. And you had no business saying that it was targeted and like suggesting people didn't need to worry. Kids did need to worry. We had no idea in those initial moments and days who the killer was or whether he was going to target somebody else. I get it. You were trying to lower the temperature, but you had no information that the temperature should be lowered. You really didn't. They've never spoken to it. They've never explained themselves. And now here we get this guy saying we said targeted because we knew he had targeted that home. Bullshit. That is not what happened. That's a lie. I'll tell you that right now. That was an obvious lie.
To show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And you know what? I'm like a kid in a candy store right now because it looks like the mainstream morons have finally opened their eyes just a little bit. They're starting to squint and see that there are things that we've been saying all along that just doesn't add up. Now, they still haven't got their mind around the fact that Brian Koberger committed this crime all by himself, but they're starting to at least see the BS that's been spread. And I have gone through every single one of the disclosure docs, categorized them, and I am going to be bringing you so much. It is unbelievable. And the things that I'm going to bring you are going to open your eyes. But before we get into that, we have got to finally take our victory lap on all the things that we've been saying going as this thing has been going along that everybody out there has ignored. And it's finally coming to light. And what's really strange is who is bringing it to light. Whenever you heard the mainstream morons refer to us as conspiracy theorists, right? How many times have you heard that? Well, it turns out that prosecutor Bill Thompson himself, as well as the investigators into the case, are now explaining who the real conspiracy theorists are. And it was the media the entire time, taking everything out of context, making up stories and running with them. It was all a farce. Then you go back and you start to think, why was the media onslaught in this case so ridiculous as we're going into trial? It wasn't because of the leaks and the information that was out there. It was because of all of the lies. How do you go into a trial when everybody's been brainwashed from day one with lies upon lies upon lies, book after book, documentary after documentary? It was all made up. And the law enforcement is now finally debunking it. Bill Thompson is debunking it. So the Dateline, oh, that was all the leaks. Like I said, it wasn't the leaks. It was the fact that the leaks had the narratives around them that were ridiculous. And as it turns out, the leaks weren't even real either. The only thing real on those leaks were the videos of the car, and a few selfies of Brian Kohberger that they now acknowledge was one of hundreds. Even the thumbs up, they have debunked it. The only reason they put the thumbs up picture in the court docs was to show that Brian Kohberger had bushy eyebrows. All of the other nonsense that was made up by the mainstream morons was just that, nonsense. They've even debunked it. In fact, you can see the media's face when they're hearing what they hear. They don't even want to believe it. They hear the investigators say, no, well, that picture didn't mean anything. That was one of hundreds of pictures that Brian Kohberger took of himself in that same pose. And they go, what? But, right. Everything was made up. And we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at some hard evidence to back that up in this one. Hold on to your hats, folks. Bob's on it. Okay, we're going to read this New York Times article, and it is comical. Investigators in Idaho unaliving case dispel baseless rumors and theories. Now, you would think that they were talking about us when they say this, right? In an interview, the lead prosecutor, Bill Thompson, decried how some of the wild speculation surrounding the case made life HELL for innocent people. I bet you it did, especially Kohberger. Watch this. In the years investigators spent scouring through what might have motivated Brian Kohberger to unalive 4 University of Idaho students, they found no sign that he had connected with his victims on social media. There was no evidence he had visited their home. There was nothing to suggest that he'd ever met them. It is even possible that he did not select the house as his target until just before he entered it around 4 a.m. one night in November 2022. The lead prosecutor in the case said in an interview on Thursday. Are you kidding me? So Bill Thompson says it's possible he didn't select the house as his target until he entered it at 4 a.m.? He said in an interview, well, then what about the 23 prior trips that supposedly Kohberger took to scout out the area? You see, they put that in there. People read it, took it as stalking, and that's why Bill Thompson in the hearing said he never stalked the victims. There's no evidence of him stalking the victims because the prosecution never even believed it. It was all the media taking things and using their opinions. We've said it the entire time. After Mr. Kohberger's sentencing to life in prison for the crimes on Wednesday and at the end of a court-ordered prohibition on discussing the case, prosecutors and investigators have started dispelling many rumors surrounding the case. Yeah, you sure did. Theories and suspicions that have long served as the basis for erroneous news coverage in endless social media debates. Mainly the erroneous news coverage, right? That's where these theories were. Bill Thompson, lead prosecutor in Latah County where the killings happened, said investigators had hunted extensively to establish a prior connection between Mr. Kohberger and the 4 students. Something to suggest why they were targeted. But if there was a connection, it remains a mystery, he said. It is possible Mr. Kohberger's attack was one of opportunity, he said, with the victims chosen at random. All of the mainstream morons and minions that have been saying it daily and the mindless guilters that followed what they said this entire time has now been disproven and we've all been vindicated. We simply don't know the answer to that, Mr. Thompson said, and human nature is, we would like to know the answer and an explanation for everything. We want everything to make sense, but what we're dealing with doesn't make sense in and of itself. You don't say there, Thompson, because after going through all of your evidence was wrong, and it proves a different case than you actually made, even in your BS. Mr. Kohberger himself did not detail his motives during his brief statements in court. Of course he didn't. Prosecutor said Mr. Kohberger drove to the victim's home in the city of Moscow near the University of Idaho campus early on November 13, 2022. They say he sneaked inside and fatally stabbed 2 women in one bedroom before fatally stabbing another woman and her boyfriend on another floor. Well, I'm going to tell you that's a lie too, because I now have proof that that is not what happened, and it didn't even happen in that order, and it likely happened at the same time. Investigators had compiled an array of evidence to tie Mr. Kohberger to the crimes. Oh, really? Such as what? Which he admitted to when he pleaded guilty to all 4 unalivings on July 2nd. Yeah. A knife sheath left at the scene we found to have his DNA on the button snap. Video surveillance showed a white car like his repeatedly driving near the victim's home around the time of the killings. Actually, no. It was video surveillance of your own police cruiser that was unmarked circling the home up until 4 a.m., Thompson, and you're busted on that now. Mr. Kohberger's cell phone appeared to have been turned off for several hours that night. Folks, don't ever turn your cell phone off, because all they need is for you to turn your cell phone off and to make up some IGG bullcrap, and you're going to prison. At the time Mr. Kohberger was arrested in December 2022, about 7 weeks after the unalivings, investigators detailed cell phone data linking Mr. Kohberger to late-night visits he had made to the areas around where the killings occurred. Yeah, you want to talk about those 23 visits? Well, we can already link 9 of them to Target at 10 p.m. at night. 9 of those 23 visits was Kohberger going to Target at 10 p.m. Give me a break. Bill Thompson conceded on Thursday that those visits did not necessarily prove Mr. Kohberger had visited the home or surveilled it, as the area served by the cell tower infrastructure probably extended all the way to the main highway that brings people into town from Washington, where Mr. Kohberger lived. You don't say. It sure takes you to Target, where Kohberger made 9 trips after 10 p.m., over the course of a almost 6-month period, which y'all added to your 23 trips. He said investigators were unable to find surveillance video that showed Mr. Kohberger's car around the house in the months before the killings. You don't say, because he never was there. Though in some cases, video of the area may have already been deleted. So if they happen to delete video, then you better hope that your phone was on, folks, because then it's proof that you were in the area casing houses as well. In the end, Mr. Thompson said it was certainly possible Mr. Kohberger did not choose the location of his attack until moments before the crimes. Wow. So Kohberger drove around, is what they're saying, until he found a house minutes before the crimes with 5 cars in front of it, every light on in the house in the middle of a dense neighborhood, and said, this is the one that I'm going to go in just blindly, and man, I am a super ninja, and just take on everybody. And then he committed an atrocity that we know now had over 100 stabs in 2 different rooms with 2 different people. That was impossible for one guy to do it. He did it inside of 7 minutes. You have got to be kidding me. In the months when prosecutors and investigators were prevented from discussing the case, an array of theories and rumors arose. Yeah, and these theories and rumors wasn't from old Pav, what they would call him a conspiracy theory. It was from the mainstream morons and their conspiracies. And it now appears many of them were false. Yeah, it appeared to me that they were false then as well, but nobody except for the people that follow me believed me. One theory discussed in a recent book about the case was that Mr. Kohberger had visited a restaurant where 2 of the victims worked. How many times did I say that was bull crap? Other news organizations, like everyone out there, reported that he had followed some of the victims on Instagram. How many documentaries said that? How many times did they say that in the new book by James Patterson and Vicky Ward? Vicky Ward is on the record in several interviews after the book has been published saying that Kohberger followed the victims on Instagram. He liked Maddie Mogan's video or pictures. He liked Kaylee's pictures. And then I hear the mainstream minions try to explain it away with, well, Kohberger was wiping his devices so they wouldn't know. You idiots. Kohberger cannot wipe the victims' devices. If he liked their pictures, he could wipe it on his end, but he couldn't wipe it on their end. It was all false. Quit trying to explain it away and still being stupid. Investigators now say there is no evidence of either. Yeah, there never was. One widely held theory was Mr. Koberger had created a Facebook account under the name Papa Roger and joined online discussions about the case. But investigators said they determined the user was not Mr. Koberger. And I'm sure glad they did, because 2 days before they, dispelled that rumor, I did a whole video dispelling it. Others have speculated Mr. Koberger, who at the time of the unalivings was a PhD student in criminal justice and criminology at nearby Washington State University, had developed an affinity for certain high-profile killers such as Elliot Rodger or Ted Bundy. But Mr. Thompson said Mr. Koberger learned about a variety of serial unalivers during his studies and did not know of anything to suggest that he had sought to emulate any of them. So if the prosecutor and the investigators in the case say there's no evidence leading to Koberger imitating Elliot Rodgers or Ted Bundy, then that means all of the morons out there and all of their brainiacs that they have on their show, like Braccato, it was a sexual warming up period for Ted Bundy. Sorry, Braccato, I watched one of you the other night where you said you were so excited that they dispelled the Elliot Rodger BS because it interfered with your Ted Bundy BS. Well, here's your Ted Bundy BS being dispelled just like Elliot Rodger. So don't take a victory lap. Lay down and shut up, guy. That certainly opened the door to say, well, maybe this is where he got the answer, Mr. Thompson said. I don't think we can definitively say that, because it's equally likely that this is just what people who are studying criminal justice are going to be reading. Thompson sounds like me. Give me a break. Mr. Thompson responded to other rumors. One documentary reported there was evidence Mr. Koberger had sat on a chair in the victim's home at one point during the unalivings. Dateline. Mr. Thompson said he was unaware of any evidence to suggest that. Dateline, bunch of farcical crap. Others have reported that investigators were following Mr. Koberger in the weeks after the unalivings when he drove at the beginning of the winter break back to his family home in Pennsylvania with his father. Mr. Koberger had not been publicly identified as a suspect at the time, yet police officers in Indiana had stopped his car twice along the way for traffic violations. But Mr. Thompson said the authorities had no notion Mr. Koberger was a potential suspect till after he was already back in Pennsylvania. The traffic stops, he said, were totally coincidental. And according to what the Moscow PD knew, they very much were. There has also been lingering speculation about Mr. Koberger's family played, including whether they had suspected Mr. Koberger could be the unaliver or whether they had even helped investigators. Drunk turkey. Some noted that Mr. Koberger had placed a phone call to his parents on the morning of the unalivings. Howard Bloom. What did you say, Howard Bloom? Oh gosh, he was worried about what he said to his mother. Mr. Thompson said Mr. Koberger had a history of daily phone calls with his family, so the call that day was not out of the ordinary. Bunch of mainstream moron BS. This article has wiped them out. He said there was no evidence that the family had provided tips to law enforcement, but he said they also didn't interfere. His sister never contacted law enforcement. It was all made up nonsense. There was nothing to indicate that the family knew he had done this. Howard Bloom. The speculation surrounding the case at times dragged innocent people into the spotlight. Online true crime sleuths had trained their sights on the surviving roommates. No, we said the surviving roommate stories didn't add up. And as you go through their actual statements, as they talk about gunshots and Dylan seeing not a guy holding a vacuum cleaner, but a guy holding a gun that was shaped like an arrow, which I believe I've pointed out 100 times what type of freaking firearm that really was. Friends and acquaintances of the victims, and in some cases, even people with the slimmest connection to the victims. And I've got to agree with them there, and they're trying to make y'all do it again. It's not Jack Showalter. It's not Jack D. And it's not Cole Berenberg like everybody's going to start trying to say it is. That is out there to make y'all go in that direction, y'all. If you continue to read the docs, you'll see that they were able to exclude all three of them and why they were able to exclude them. Don't fall for their traps. Mr. Thompson said that harmful speculation put some innocent people through HELL and said it was a poor commentary on the portion of our society right now. Some innocent, the mainstream morons put Kohberger and his family through HELL and got him convicted. I can understand people's curiosity, Mr. Thompson said. I cannot countenance the way these young people were stalked and threatened and suffered. And that's what they're hoping y'all do with the Jack D, the Jack Showalter, and the Quo Berenberg stuff. Because if you start doing that, they're going to say that that's what's happening. They're going to shut us all down. Don't fall for their trap. Their families as well as themselves, it's outrageous. I agree with that.
You collected numerous devices, but you collected an active phone that he had. What did you find on that phone?
Well, the phone, it just provided us and matched up everything that we mostly already had. You know, we'd already conducted search warrants and had a lot of his activity, a lot of his phone usage. So when we actually had the physical phone and we were able to do the extract of it, you know, we didn't gain a lot from it. You know, we know that he was clearing a lot of his devices and wiping things from them. We know that he used VPNs. So, but we also did find screenshots and pictures of news coverage of Moscow.
On the case.
Correct.
So after all of that, all they found on Kohberger's phone was pictures of the news coverage of the case. He's a criminology student studying this type of crime that happened 10 miles from his university. Everybody in the world, especially around there, especially criminology students, would have so many screenshots of this case, and that's what you found on his phone. You have got to be kidding me. And why do they use VPNs? Not to hide things. They use VPNs to get around firewalls, because without a VPN, you can only view things that are approved for America. You use a VPN so you can look at websites that you can't look at without a VPN, not to hide things. What a freaking dillweed, man. All the mainstream morons ought to be, they ought to be all ashamed of themselves. And the minions, they really should.
That's so classic.
Right.
It has been said that there were pictures on his phone of groups of young people in Moscow, and that Maddie, possibly Kaylee, were in some of those photos. Is there any truth to that?
No truth at all. There was not.
This game, you're not ready for it.
To this date, we have never found a single connection, anything, between any of the four victims or the other two surviving roommates with him. No pictures, no texts, no. There was rumor, speculation that he was following some of them on different social media sites. There was sites that were sent to us of, hey, this is him, he's following. They were either untrue or they were sites that people made that were completely fake. And so we had to research and go.
Okay, so let's unpack that right there, y'all. Number one, he said there was no photos of his phone of any of the victims, and there was no connection at all. That means the photos that you seen on Dateline's super leaking special, when they showed the local college students and people seen themselves in those pictures that were friends of the victims, those were all fake. And I said that when I watched the Dateline episode in a video. I said Dateline made it, the way they worded it was they found pictures of local girls on Kohberger's phone. They never said that the pictures that they were showing were pictures of local girls from Kohberger's phone. They showed those pictures as examples. And they showed specific pictures as examples for specific reasons because they wanted to insinuate that Kohberger had friends of the victims' pictures on his phone. As you just heard him say, that was a farcical thing. And to take it one step further, they literally had tips coming in of people saying that picture that they showed on Dateline was of me. Kohberger had a picture of me on his phone and I was in class with him. And now the mainstream morons have found those tips and they're talking about them like they're true. And it was all from pictures Dateline had clipped, not Kohberger, and showed them as examples. This is an example of mainstream moron ridiculousness and flat out just being dumb, I guess. But then the second part to that we have to note was the fact that people had sent him information saying, here, look, this is Kohberger following these victims. What he's referring to is the shadow dragon BS that Drunk Turkey and Forensic Frenzy has brought up 100 times over the last couple of years. And that is him debunking that, just like we suggested that those were fake Kohberger accounts people made after the arrest. Those fake accounts followed the victims before they removed their social media accounts. And then Shadow Dragon just simply picked up on that. But these people continued to spew their nonsense over and over during the course of this whole case. And this is the officers in the case, the investigators, debunking all of the mainstream morons and minions. There's nothing that's debunked anything we've said. It's all been to debunk mainstream morons and minions.
Go into every single one of those just to prove or debunk what somebody had made up and of course then that spread to
what somebody had made up. Yeah, the media and the minions.
The media, and it went wild that he was following or there was a connection, and there wasn't. We wanted that, I think naturally we need that, what's the connection, what's the why, and we have found zero, never any connection.
I saw the...
Naturally you need it. Yeah, you needed it for a conviction of a guy. You needed it for a conviction. You got no connection from Kohberger to anything. One made up piece of evidence. Because the car is not evidence. I'm going to prove that in the next video today.
Amount of search warrants that you applied for and got returns on, and I don't think we saw the returns, but the work you were doing was monumental going through everything, and I saw that in the documents. Back at the house...
Wait a minute. Yeah, the work they were doing with the warrants was monumental, and all of you mainstream morons and minions said, look at all these warrants that they have, 60 terabytes of data. That's a mountain of evidence against Brian Kohberger. Wait till y'all see the real evidence they have. Now you realize that all of that work that they did to try to connect Kohberger to the case, not one thing ever connected him to the case, like you just heard the officer say. And y'all believe that Kohberger should be convicted of this crime? Oh my goodness. I feel sorry for your brains, people.
Kaylee, in the documents that just became public, there was a preliminary autopsy report that said she was stabbed over 20 times. Mr. Gonsalves said, and we haven't seen the final autopsy, but he has said she was stabbed, Kaylee, over 30 times. Do you know the amount of times she was stabbed?
We do. We know the exact amount of times that every one of them was stabbed, and it's not something that we would speak about for the privacy of the families. And but I can tell you, we've met with families, and his information that he has is very accurate.
Well, we know because of the public documents, her face was unrecognizable. And then the concept of, okay, a second weapon. Where do you stand on that to set the record straight?
Yeah, where do you stand on that?
We believe that there was one primary weapon. The same knife was used to kill all four.
Okay, so when he says we believe there's one primary weapon, that means that he also believes there's a secondary weapon, and he's going to go on to admit it.
As has been reported, and I think the family has spoke to this, Kaylee was struck in the face, and we don't know what caused the marks that were left by it. It wasn't fatal, and we just don't know what caused that. And we've never located, obviously, the knife that we know did kill all four, and we don't know what was used to do that.
Now,
Okay, whoa. So what he just said right there was, we've never located the knife, and we don't know what was used to do that. I'm willing to believe that, yeah, he does, because it was the butt of a gun. And now that we know that in Dylan's statement, she didn't see a vacuum cleaner, she said she saw the guy holding a gun shaped like an arrow, which means she saw them holding a gun that was likely an assault type rifle with a folding stock, like we've said the entire time. And Bethany heard a gunshot and saw, what she thought was a sparkler under her door. So yeah, you know what it was. But here's the thing. He also said, but that wasn't fatal. Well, he needs to read his own autopsy reports, because the fatal injuries on Kaylee was stab wounds to obviously vital organs, but also a stab wound that would have been a fatal stab wound to her rear clavicle, and her rear clavicle artery or subclavicle artery and subclavical artery and subclavical vein. So to make sure we understand what that means, you can see right here, this is the clavicle bone, starts here, goes all the way to the spinal cord, or goes to the sternum really. And to understand what a subclavical artery is, this is the subclavical artery that goes underneath the clavicle. And then you've got the jugular, but then you've got in blue here, red is the subclavical artery, blue is the subclavical vein, and then this is the jugular vein. So you have to understand that before you can understand what's next. And this is the brain. This is what you have to penetrate to get a subdural hematoma. So that means that she was struck in the face, as you would picture her being attacked from the front. She was struck in the face, but the stab wound that actually severed her rear subclavicular artery means that she was stabbed from the rear. So she was stabbed in the face and she was stabbed in the back. Now, how does one person do that? But then one person does that at the same time that they create two subdural hematomas in her head. That has to be a shot that's deep enough to crack the skull and go all the way into a certain area of the brain, which cannot be done with anything less than something very heavy and hard. So explain to me how Kaylee is stabbed in the back, the front, beaten in her face, and two subdural hematomas created in her head by one assailant with one weapon, and at the same time he's attacking Maddie. This case is ridiculous, and y'all are admitting at least to the second weapon, which means you're admitting to more than one assailant, Guy. Thank you.
A fist can be a deadly weapon.
Right.
Won't create
The
a
injuries
subdural
to
hematoma.
the face, could that have simply been from a hand on her
Nope.
face?
No.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you believe the injuries to her face came from something other than his fist?
Yes, I think the fist could have been part of it, but it certainly appears something else
Two weapons.
Struck her to cause the marks.
So the defense experts were right.
Not consistent with a fist.
What about marks near her mouth
She was
that
gagged.
came out? I believe they came out in public documents. Bound?
Yep.
Gagged?
And those are what I'm referencing, and no, it doesn't appear. There was no evidence that she was bound or gagged.
Yeah, there is evidence because there was gag marks found around her mouth, and part of what unalived her was partial asphyxiation. So you only get partial asphyxiation if you're strangled and the the autopsy reports did not report any strangulation marks, or if something is blocking your airway, such as a gag. And that's what she had. And she had petechial hemorrhages in her eyes and gag marks around her mouth. So there is absolutely evidence that she was gagged.
Are the marks from a knife?
Nope.
No.
Nope, from a gag.
No.
So the reality is the extent of what was done to her may be a mystery forever.
Yeah, it may be.
No, it will not be.
And I came to understand how crucial it is to know the word.
We saw publicly, it came out in legal filings, the selfie taken just hours after this all happened. He has a thumbs up. How do you interpret that picture?
That's hard to answer without putting my own opinion into it. You know, this individual, there's a lot of strange things about him and his demeanor and his way his brain works. So to say what I think that was would be pure speculation.
What about law enforcement theory? Because his thumb is up, right? His thumb is up. So
she's asking him to speculate like they've all speculated, and they want him to say so bad what they've been saying, but then the other one drops the bombshell that proves them all to be ridiculously dumb.
That denotes...
Right, but the reality was we have many, many other pictures of him, selfies, where he has a very similar pose.
Bam! Right there, many other pictures of him, selfies where he had a similar pose. That was just another regular morning for Brian Kohberger. You mainstream morons, give me a break. So the eyes of the world are starting to open now, but they're not open all the way. It's just beginning to happen. Now, what they're going to do, I assure you, don't fall into this trap as they dispel all of the rumors first of the mainstream morons and the minions. Then they're going to look for you to start accusing people like Jack D, Jack Showalter, and Cole Berenberg, all in particular, as well as other frat boys. That's what they're looking to do, and that's what a lot of people who's going to start reading through the evidence is going to start to do. Don't fall into the trap, because that is what is going to make everybody look bad, and they're going to point to it. We've got to stay on focus. I did a video yesterday where I pointed out things about possibly Showalter's apartment. That doesn't mean Showalter was gun rack guy. A lot of people started taking that and running in another direction. They debunked Showalter being a suspect later in the investigation. They debunked Jack D being a suspect later in the investigation. They debunked Cole Berenberg being a suspect later in the investigation. I'll show you how all of that was investigated very, very hard. They had them as persons of interest, but then they found evidence otherwise. So don't start with the evidence that they started with and come to a different conclusion. Then you're going to look bad when you find the real evidence that exonerated them. And that's what they're hoping that you do. Stay on focus, because there are things that I'm going to point out that are unequivocally what we've said this entire time. And I've got to be very careful the way that I point it out, because they do not want this information out there, I assure you. But in the next video, I got you two coming today, I'm going to show you unequivocally that one of their main pieces of evidence against Brian Kohberger being the white Hyundai Elantra, I'm going to disprove that whole part of this case with two different documents and statements that match up perfectly, along with physical evidence that you could see with your own eyes that literally proves that was not Brian Kohberger's car. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms. And until next time, Pavarotti's out.